Easy lover, she'll get a hold on you, believe it, like no other. Before you know it, you'll be on your knees. She's an easy lover. She'll take your heart, but you won't feel it, like no other. And I'm just trying to make you see. And then it goes a bit like higher pitched. She's the kind of girl you dream of, dream and keep a hold of. You better forget it. Oh, you'll never get it. Down. She'll play around and leave you and deceive you. You better forget it. Oh, you'll regret it. No, you'll never change it, so leave it. Just leave it. You'll get out quick, 'cause seeing is believing. It's the only way you'll ever know. Down. And that's it. I'm done with that bullshit. Easy Lover by Phil Collins and Phil Bailey.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah.
1984.
Phil and Phil.
Phil and Phil.
Can you have enough Phils in a room? Probably,
No.
Probably not.
You know why? I got fantastic Phil. And this is Invert the Y. Episode Stardate Log, Captain Zog 12.1.5.9, and USS Invert the Y is orbiting another planet of Retro Man bullshit. And like I just said, you can never have enough Phils in this room. You can't get your fill of a Phil. And I got him in. Fantastic Phil. Thanks, Fantastic Phil, for coming in.
Thanks for having me back.
Man, dude, you are my first guest in my first episode of the brand new year of 2020.
Oh, God. Pressure. Under pressure.
Under pressure. Do.
Do.
Yeah, there's no pressure, man.
No pressure.
No pressure.
And of the new decade.
Some people don't classify 2020 as the beginning of the decade.
It's 2021 or something
Yeah,
like that?
some people classify it as 2021 because of the calendar, because there was no year zero.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I read that.
Yeah, so I don't know how I say 2021.
And isn't that a Seinfeld episode as well? Newman, he books the new millennium or whatever it is as well.
Does he?
What a great show. Seinfeld.
Oh,
One
man.
of my favourite American. I know you've had a comedy episode not that long ago. But yeah, look, and American v British things I think were brought up.
Yeah, we did.
I think you got to acknowledge Seinfeld as being up there with one of the all-time greats.
Seinfeld you never get sick of.
No, I never.
I'll watch a rerun, and as that's what he said, you'll never get sick of Seinfeld.
Yeah, give it a break and come back to
Yep.
it, and then I still wet myself
Yep.
over it.
You can see it's very clearly 90s, though. It's weird. Like, we were talking about it before, because we're old men now.
Yes.
And we've got blood pressure problems. Right, fucking hell. But
It's through the roof.
oh, mate, mine's bad. I could flip out at any stage. Just ask Rocket Russell, shout out to him. Yeah.
Shout out to the Russ.
He had to fucking help me a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, God. Medical emergency.
Yeah, it was a medical emergency. No, it's looking dated. I got to admit, I was watching it. What was it on? 10 Peach, one weird free-to-air TV show. It was just random, and the clothing is very 90s.
Oh, yeah.
And the set's very 90s as well. I think he's got a Macintosh computer in the background, and he's got his bike hanging up on the door.
Yeah, oh, look, the bike hanging on the door. Yeah, the Macintosh old school.
Yeah, the old school Mac. Like that one over there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
That isn't a fish tank, but is that functional? That Mac?
Yeah, so I've got a Macintosh Plus for those that can't see it. It was working. The monitor was working. Everything was working. But then I turned it on randomly one day to try and see if I could get the disk drive to keep. Because if you don't keep the disk drive moving or lubricate the disk drive, they seize up.
It is a machine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I turned it on and no love.
Now
So something's blown on it.
That'd be a podcast in itself, wouldn't it? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Macintosh was simplified by Steve Jobs and the other dude. I can't remember his name, but the mouse wasn't
Wozniak wasn't part of the Macintosh. I don't think he was. No. So when the Macintosh was originally Steve Jobs' project on his own.
Yeah.
And because the Apple IIe was their biggest product at that stage in 1984.
Yeah.
And so they wanted to move away from the Apple II, and they kept like revising the Apple II and making it a bit more powerful and all that sort of stuff. But Steve Jobs basically was being Steve Jobs and being ridiculous. And so the board stuck him in a corner to work on what I think back then it was even called the Macintosh project.
Yeah. And
he was the one with a couple of other engineers that created the Mac as it became the classic Mac.
Yeah. Is that because you've got the actual unit, the keyboard, and sitting there is one of the mouse. And isn't that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that mouse was derived from simplifying and making it easier to use that as opposed to PCs at the time that were quite complicated and whatever it is. Did he take that from something?
He stole it from Xerox PARC.
Oh, right.
Right. So what happened was Xerox were working because so here's the story. This is real nerd shit. Xerox were back in the late 70s and early 80s were very scared of the future because they actually believed that the paperless office was a thing, which is crazy because it's 2020 and we still use paper everywhere. I keep saying the environment, let it go because you can't. We're still using paper, folks, in 2020, right? So they thought that the paperless office was a thing. So they obviously make a lot of money on photocopying and all that sort of stuff. They decided to develop a thing called, I can't remember what it was called. It was basically a computer that had a graphical user interface, and it was the world's first GUI or graphical user interface.
Yeah.
And they didn't know what to do with it, and they were under pressure to sell it and get rid of it. And what happened was Steve Jobs heard about it, and he walked into Xerox PARC in Palo Alto in the US, and he saw it. In fact, Xerox was showing him other things that they were working on. They had their own. I think Xerox had set up their own department to create different innovation ideas of the future, what the future office would look like.
Yeah.
So there were plenty of other things that they worked on, and they invited Steve Jobs, who by that stage was a big thing in Silicon Valley, and he walked around the office there.
Yeah.
And they were showing him different things, and he wasn't excited about anything until he saw this prototype they had of what they thought the paperless office would be in the future.
Yeah.
And he said, "What's that?" And they said, I can't remember the name of the prototype that they called it or whatever they said they called the thing was. But he said, "I want that."
Is this Xerox? And just excuse my ignorance on this. Is this Xerox who are known for photocopying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, photocopying.
Yeah, right.
So that's what I'm saying. Like their whole bread and butter was built on paper.
Yeah.
And they thought, well, what happens if the paperless office or future was a thing? What will we do?
Yeah.
And so they created this complete separate department where these nerds would sit on bean bags. I'm being serious. They were like these brainstorming type people, and they'd sit around and go, okay, what will the future look like? This is back in the late 70s. And they created this whole bunch of other little things, which they showed Steve Jobs, and he wasn't interested at all until he saw this computer.
Yeah.
And it looked nothing like the Mac, but what he loved about it was it had a mouse.
Yeah.
It was the first ever time he saw a mouse, and it had the GUI, or the graphical user interface, like icons on a desk, like on a screen. And he went, "What's that?" And they said, "Oh, it's such and such." And it's going to bug me that I can't remember the name of the thing. And he says, "Well, I want it." And they sold it to him.
Oh, right.
Right. And he was on record saying, well, they didn't know what they were doing with it. And this is how funny he is. I think he's funny, but he was actually insulting. He said they were just copyheads. They had no idea what they were doing with it, but I knew I could see the future.
Do you reckon he copied the plans for it while he was in the Xerox office
he's been
using one of their photocopies?
Well, he did because, he's been on record saying that great artists steal.
Yeah.
Right. So he took this thing that Xerox PARC created, right, which was its own department for Xerox. It was called Xerox PARC. And he took it and then he broke it all down and re-engineered it. And originally it was called the Lisa, right? And the Lisa was a really ultra. When it was finished, it was a very primitive version of what the Mac would be, but it was a really expensive computer that no one could afford, right? And so Apple said, "You've killed us with this shit, right? That's it. You're off that project. That project's dead in the water." And they didn't know what to do with Steve Jobs, so that the board sent him out to play with another department because he had nothing better to do.
Yeah.
But he really loved what he saw at Xerox PARC, and he loved what he created with the Lisa. His first prototype computer with a graphical user interface and a mouse. And then he said, okay, well, I'm going to create this thing called a Macintosh. Because they'd already started this project internally in Apple called the Macintosh Project.
Yeah.
And the Macintosh originally was nothing like what it would end up being. So he created this very slim-looking Mac. And what we're talking about, folks, is a Macintosh Plus. That's a 1986 version that I've got.
Yeah, it's a sort of off-grade.
Yeah, so they came out in 1984, and they came out with only 512 kilobytes of RAM, and that one is a 1986 model, and it's upgraded to 1 megabyte of RAM, right? But it doesn't have a hard drive. It's only got a floppy disk drive, a 3.5-inch floppy disk drive. And so, yeah, Steve Jobs took that idea from Xerox PARC. He had his first prototype called the Lisa. Then he worked at the Macintosh department, or the Macintosh project at Apple, and then they created this thing, the Mac, as we know it and love it.
And what's the Mac that's in Seinfeld's room?
That would be a 90s Mac. So they're like, by then, Jobs had left, and they kept the Macintosh name, but they really changed the design of the thing. See, Steve Jobs...
He left and came back, though, didn't he?
Yes, he did, because he was kicked out of the... So what happened was, when the Macintosh was launched, he had these sales projections, but they didn't meet them because the Macintosh was way too expensive, because they were competing against IBM compatibles and IBM clones, and you could get an IBM compatible or even an IBM machine for half the price, roughly, than a Macintosh back in the 80s. And so the board were like, well, what the hell? You said this thing would sell for this price and would be this amount to make or manufacture and would sell these amounts of units, and we've achieved none of these targets. And they kicked him off the board, right? Or out of the company, basically. But what Steve Jobs did, because he's smart, he kept $1 of shares, right? So he was still a shareholder of the company, so he could still attend AGM meetings and stuff like that.
He's still a shareholder.
Exactly, right? But in disgust, he sold all of his shares or his shareholdings, and he kept $1 worth, and then he went into a bit of a limbo land for a year or two, but then he created a company called Next, and Next was basically, again, him being overly possessive and creating this crazy machine called, I think it was a Next computer, which was a specialized computer that you could use in research and high-level engineering type products. It wasn't for home use, really. Yep. And then Apple, years and years later, were looking for a new operating system, and they ended up buying Steve Jobs' company, which was the Next company.
The Next company. Right,
because they wanted his software. And then by default, he came back into Apple because they purchased his company, right? And he came back into Apple, and then, long story short, the Apple board, which they weren't doing very well in the early 90s, Apple. They were basically dead and buried. And then the Apple board called him an interim CEO. They called him an ICEO. And then I can't remember the name of the guy who was the CEO. I can't remember his name, but they got rid of him. The board got rid of him, and he became, again, the CEO of Apple Computers. So he went back to his company. And then I remember reading the first things that he did was he hated remember the Newton, because you talk about Seinfeld.
Yes.
Remember the Newton Palm?
Yeah.
It was like a very early iPad.
Yeah.
He hated that fucking thing. And so he said, I want that gone. And they said, oh, why? He says, I don't like the stylus. I hate the fact that you have to use a stylus to write on the screen. It's ugly. It's shit. We don't sell hardly any of them. So he got rid of it. And he looked at their product line and he said, well, if I'm supposed to buy a computer, which one do I buy? And they explained to him all the different levels of computers and what they did. And he said, well, I don't understand any of it. So what we're going to do, we're going to halve our product line. We're only going to sell a handful of products. So they dropped a whole bunch of their products. He hated the way the Mac looked. So they re-engineered the way the Mac looked. And one of the early things that he did was, you know, the Mac where it was like blue or coloured at the back?
Purple, orange, blue.
Yeah. They still use CRT screens back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So it was like a coloured screen. And he made it colourful. And, you know, they dropped the Macintosh and they called it iMac.
That's right.
They did different things.
Yeah.
And then he was pedantic because, like, if you go back to the Macintosh I've got, which is that 86 Mac Classic, you'll see on the keyboard it's got like arrows, like directional arrows on the keyboard. He hated that. He didn't want any of that on his keyboard. He wanted a really simplified keyboard, and he wanted there's articles and books I've read where he's had arguments and fired internally people that came to him and said, "Look, Steve, we need to put fans into the Mac because it's creating so much heat." And he'd say, "No, it ruins the zen of the." Because he was all into Zen and all into all that
Very
sort of stuff. Yeah. He goes, "I want none of that in my computers. Get rid of it. I don't want to see it." And they'd have to re-engineer the thing so it wouldn't overheat.
Okay.
And so that's why there's vents placed where they are. It was very clever, but also he basically killed people to try and get what he wanted.
His way or the...
It was his way or the highway. But
highway.
really what he did was initially, I can understand the board's position. He created a machine that looked unreal, and there was nothing out like... Because this is before Windows came out, right? And so no one had a product like this, even though he stole it from Xerox PARC. He created this machine, but it was way too expensive for the average person to buy, so no one knew what to do with it. People at home couldn't afford a $4,000, $5,000 machine, and people in the office wouldn't be able to afford it either.
Yeah, because $4,000 in the 80s.
That's a lot of money. I mean, there's inflation calculators out there. You can work it out, but that's a lot of money. I mean, you don't pay that money really today for a computer.
That's
right?
high-end.
That's high-end gaming stuff, right? So even then you wouldn't pay that amount for it unless you really wanted to. So he drove himself out of the company originally with his crazy business practices, but at the end of the day, it was a success, especially in the late 90s when he re-engineered it and he made it colourful and it was the iMac and it was a lot cheaper. And he was really selling the software more than anything else because he said the software is really more important than – because he wanted the icons to look a certain way. He wanted it to be so easy that even his – that a grandmother could use it. Or he's been quoted to say all those sorts of things. I want anybody to pick it up and just use it.
Yeah.
Right? And so he really did take that concept that Xerox had created back in the late 70s, early 80s, and he just completely re-engineered it and ran with it. So it's an interesting story. I don't know how we got on the topic of Macintoshes.
From Seinfeld.
Macintoshes.
Looking over at the Macintoshes.
Yeah. I tell you, the original Macintosh, the 512 kilobyte one that was released in 1984 is worth a lot of money now.
For collectors.
Yep. If you get on eBay and you can see someone selling that Macintosh model in the box, I mean, these are rare now. No one has these in the box.
Yeah.
But some people I've seen do. You're talking like 12, 13, 14, 15
Does
grand.
it have to be running to keep that value?
Yeah, right. Ideally, yeah. Mine was running, and I had the problem with mine was that I couldn't find the software really to run on it. You have to have a certain operating system that will run on that particular model of Macintosh. And the sad thing is that I found the operating system from some guy up in Queensland on eBay. I was talking to him and he sent them to me. And just as I was about to, fire it up, I couldn't get it to start up again. So maybe like a transistor or something's blown. Nothing major's gone on it. I've just never had it repaired. And when I have gone to Apple, this is the funny thing, I have gone to Apple, right? And I've told this story before where I've gone to the Genius bar at an Apple store and I've said, I've got a Mac I want to repair. And they're like, what is it? And I tell them and they're like, Why? Why do you want to repair that thing? I go, because it's, I don't know, I want it to run.
They're like that with their phones and iPods.
Yeah, they want to know about it.
They have a cut-off date.
Yep.
I think at the moment, you could probably go back as far with a phone for a battery replacement, maybe a 6. Anything prior to that, they've they don't really acknowledge it
No,
anymore.
they don't.
But then the trouble is too, being a fan of iPods and having a collection of a couple of old iPods, the trying to repair them is now it's not an impossibility, but it's very challenging because some of the parts, lithium batteries, for example, they're key, obviously, to running them. They don't stock them here, and to import them, it's very challenging because you can't import them via planes because of obviously the aviation rules and so forth like that.
Yeah.
So it is a bit of a shame that being a fan of collecting things and trying to keep older things restored as much as possible, that is forgotten.
I mean, there was a guy, I ended up finding someone that would look at it, the Macintosh. He lived down in the city somewhere, not far from where you live, roughly, right? And I spoke to him and I said, look, this is what I've got. He was cool with it. He's like, okay, cool. He said, but I want $150 just to look at it. And I'm like, oh, okay, then what? And he goes, and then I'll charge X number of dollars per hour and parts. I've got to charge you for parts, and maybe I don't have those original parts because if you want to keep it original, I might not be able to. I might have to get like alternative type parts. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to spend all this amount of money and take it all the way to the city just to get it fired up. Yeah. Even though I really wanted it to, I thought it would be cool if I fired it up and it had like, what was it called? Paint. I think that was the program that was on the Mac. It was called Paint or something like that. You could paint shit on there and go, welcome, Fantastic Phil, to Invert the Y as you walk through, But no, it's just more of a talking piece now, I've got a relative that's an engineer, and he's offered to look at it and
give it a go.
To give it a go, but I haven't bothered to take it to him. So I think he could fix it. I think he's like it's a diode or a transistor, something's quite easy to fix, but I haven't got there with that.
Okay.
And you still got your iPods?
Yeah, I still got them.
Because they were revolutionary, man. Like the 2000s, right? That iPod original was like amazing.
Yeah, the first one had a very low capacity memory, and then they expanded over time, didn't they? They got greater and bigger with what they could do, and
I think my first one was the color screen.
The color screen.
Yeah,
I've got two of the old original grey screens, which one was a 20 and one was a 40 gig.
That's right.
And they weren't cheap at the time. Ran off the old MP3 format. That's right. Ran off the old MP3 format, which is dead. So MP3's been killed.
Has it?
In terms of there's no one that's really making anything or producing anything or supporting MP3 formats anymore. I only just found that out, so I haven't had enough time to research.
Because we upload to MP3.
Yeah.
I mean, we record on a different format, but we record on a wave and then we convert to MP3.
MP3.
Yeah. So I don't know if,
there's another file. I don't know enough about this, so it's going to sound like a super idiot trying to talk about this, but which is probably like most things. The file format of MP3 is now inferior. There are better file. I think the basic Apple file format for recording digitally is already a lot better.
Yeah.
So that's what a lot of them have changed or converted into. I suppose like anything with time and progress, the digital files have evolved as well.
Yeah.
But MP3s are not really being redone anymore or being done in a way.
It's all over, man.
It's all over.
Do you remember how like amazing that was with like you saw, what was that, Shazam and all those weird ass file sharing, and what was that one that Lars had a problem with? Napster. That was all MP3s. That was my understanding. Could be wrong on that, but they were all file sharing files, and that was massive in the 2000s.
They went hard against it.
Yeah.
Metallica.
Yeah.
I suppose it's to combat piracy.
Yeah.
And so they get a living from what they've made and produced. And now streaming.
Well, you know what I was about to say? Do you reckon Lars just wasn't a visionary at all? He couldn't see the future. I could see his point, but I can't see Like, he looks silly now because everything's digital. And Metallica, they're on Spotify.
Took Tool a long time to.
It took Tool a very long time, up until last year, though.
Up until to jump into the digital age.
Yep.
They've now released a lot of their material on Spotify and I think iTunes as well. But iTunes is
we were talking about this. This is what we're trying to get at. So iTunes is dead too. And I asked you a question because I don't use iTunes anymore. I used to have. I've got a MacBook Pro, which I won't replace. I'll be honest with you. This is where I'm at with Apple, right? I had an iPhone, got rid of it, got a Samsung S8, got rid of that, and got an S10 Plus now. And I'll never go back to Apple because they want to charge you double the price for less features. That's how I feel. And the MacBook Pro is the same, right? It's been great. I love it. But I know that I can get a more powerful machine for half the price if I go to the Windows side of things, even though I don't like Windows. But iTunes was like really pivotal to. I remember when I had this is what shits me with Apple, right? I had the iPod and I love that thing, and I remember going into Apple, going, I want to get a new iPod because the one I've got's a bit weird. It's going like skipping tracks, and you had told me, well, this is what happens with iPods on their way out. They start skipping tracks, and the hard drive goes weird. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to get another one. And I went into the local Apple store and I said, I want an iPod. We don't sell them anymore. I go, huh? They go, we sell iPod Touches and we sell this and that, but we don't sell the classic. And I said, but I need more space than what you provide on an iPod Touch. I think the iPod Touch was like, I don't know, 16 gig or something. I said, I've got like 60, 70 gigs worth of music. And she just looked at me like, that's impossible, right? Like, you're a freak. I'm like, yeah, but I know I'm the minority, but you guys have just basically told me that's it. You can't help me anymore. And she just said, yeah, well, we can't help you now. So then I was like, well, what's my options? And obviously my options is my phone, right? Because they've basically said everybody plays their music these days on their phone. Why would you buy another device?
It's a bit weird, because like having streaming and unlimited streaming with Amazon and so forth, what I got now, that is like walking around with a 200 gig plus music library, whereas before you had to build it and buy it and so forth. So, well,
we used to do, I'm an old man, but back in the day, everybody had to do this. You bought a CD, then you put it on your computer. You rip it. This is if you didn't want to purchase it on the iTunes store, but I remember something very clear. Now, it's all coming to my mind here. You used to get the CD, rip it to your hard drive on your computer, and then hook up your iPod Classic, which is what we had, or any other iPod, and then sync them. And it used to take forever. The more music you had, the longer it took, right? But then I remember one day you getting very excited going, the iTunes store is open in Australia. And I'm like, what does that mean, man? You're like, dude, I can now buy music from iTunes in Australia, because previous to that it was available in the US and other parts of the world, but we didn't have it.
No, the ripping function was available through iTunes.
That's right, but the purchasing of music wasn't
available.
No. Think about that now.
They've stopped that too, but they haven't in a way, because you can still to this day go on and buy something. I don't know. I'm coming onto this podcast today very uninformed.
Yeah, but you got your notepad. That's the start.
Notepad's blank.
Yeah,
the Christmas list is on there.
Yeah, you know what this is? This is this podcast is a bit like getting back into shape. Because remember when I turned on the machine, I went, how do I do this again? What button do I press? Because guess what? We don't have Jason relaxation again. We have him in sock puppet form, but I can't be fucked. I can't be fucked on. That's right, Richard Dan. Hello, fantastic Phil. How are you? Good to see you again. I can't be fucked. I can't be bothered. But so with iTunes today, it still exists partially.
Yeah, it still exists.
You can open it up, play your music that you've purchased or ripped from your computer. But you're saying the store is gone. Is that right?
This is what I'm hearing, but it's still there today. iTunes does have that horrible thing, though, of if you've purchased something, depending on the rights and so forth of where the artist may be, the music has disappeared. I've had a few albums and songs disappear out of my old purchases, and I'm not sure how or why that's happened. but some tracks are not available anymore. Back to an example of that is for Bond, there's a Never Say Never Again movie soundtrack it was hard to get, but it was available digital on iTunes, and I would prefer, instead of just ripping something or downloading, at least buying it. I'm happy to buy it. It doesn't bother me. But I did buy it, and it's gone. So there was an update, and it's just not there anymore on search. And you go into your purchased items, which is part of that, download what your purchase history. And it's quite interesting. That actually is still there from 10 years ago. Some songs are still there. So it's good that they've remembered that. But that is a worry about.
But do you see now my concern? Like I've been saying this now. Like everyone wants to go to streaming, or they want to go to account, like having digital things tied to an account. And this is a great example. Like when somebody makes a decision at the high end and says, we're not going to support that anymore, what happens to all the stuff you purchased?
Yeah,
you don't actually own anything.
No, you'd be going in and finding somewhere in the fine print that they would have allowed, for whatever reason, that to be removed. Or because of, say, I don't know, for example, maybe it was under Columbia years ago that has stopped the licensing for it.
Well, they do that in video games too. Like, just off the top of my head, a game like Alan Wake, back on the old Xbox 360, I don't think you can get that anymore, because I think the music or some kind of images that were shown in that game, the rights to that are gone, because I think the company ceases to exist. So all the legal red tape mumbo jumbo is preventing people from downloading that game or playing that game now.
So unless you had the physical disc,
unless you've got the physical disc
and the machine to play it on,
you're stuffed, right? That's whether you want to play it or not is another question, another matter. But what I'm saying is, the digital world is not a great world if things change from the legal, the legalese that happens in the background, right? So Apple made a decision and they said, we're not going to support iTunes anymore, or we're getting rid of it, and we're going to do something else with this platform that we have. And I understand that, because it got really messy with iTunes. Like everything was tethered to it, right? So all of a sudden you got multiple devices running off it, and it got more and more convoluted as time went on. But in the background, there is now content you can't get, right? So what does that mean? You're shafted, right? Yeah, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it pisses me off.
It's not the end of the world.
But it pisses me off, right? And that's what I'm saying. The modern world wants you to subscribe to multiple accounts, right, just to watch TV now, right? So all of a sudden you've got Disney Plus, you got Netflix, you got Amazon, Stan, right? Then you might have cable networks. You might have like Foxtel or something like that.
Apple themselves have started
Apple TV, right? All of that shit just to watch content that you used to be able to watch, maybe not in that amount of magnitude, but you used to be able to watch it in one source, right? But now what happens if, I'm using an example, a very poor example, but what if Disney says, oh, well, it didn't work out for us with Disney Plus? Now, some people wouldn't give a shit. I personally wouldn't, but you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, you don't have that content anymore, right? Games is the best example. This is why I don't like digital games, really, even though I'm guilty of it too. I buy them. But if Sony suddenly turned around and said, you know what, we're not making the PlayStation anymore. That's highly unlikely, but what if they said that? What happens to all the games that you bought digital on the digital store? What happens to it?
I guess
Google's the best one. Google Stadia, right, which is purely a streaming service. We don't even have it here yet. It's only available in North America, I think. And it's not doing very well, so we may never get it. But that's a great example of you've only got one option. That option is purely digital transactions. So when they decide they don't want to be part of that business anymore, what happens to that box that you've got, that little streaming box you got? It's useless, because you can't buy anything with it anymore, and the things you did buy, they're all gone. So I don't know, man. This is iTunes. That's the beginning, I reckon.
Yeah, it's just,
of all this shit.
For me, it's about accessibility, just understanding where that's going to go to. I'm in a bit of a limbo about how to listen to things at the moment. Yeah, I've subscribed.
Have you still got your iPod though, haven't you?
I've still got the iPods. Admittingly, not using it
Pods.
too much.
You'd be the only guy around, I reckon, that's got multiple iPods.
Multiple iPods, still got them. Obviously the phone.
Do you use the phone?
The phone and the streaming service, because I'm part of Amazon. That's where I use the Amazon one as opposed to Spotify, the Amazon Music playlist, which I've subscribed to. But that's part of being an Amazon subscriber,
right?
So, look, there are massive pros with streaming and these streaming services for music. There's tons of things you can go in there and find it, which has changed the whole need for. Again, I don't know what to do with the CDs, the boxes and boxes of CDs I've got.
Well, I got a whole wardrobe that I had custom built for CDs, right? And look, I don't really play them.
No, neither do I.
But I want them because, you see, it's my right. I can play that whenever I want. And if the internet goes down, right, I can still play the thing.
Yeah.
If whoever holds that account, right, decides they're out of business now or they don't want to be part of that business anymore, it doesn't affect me because I've got something physical that I can use. It's ownership. That's what bugs me about I've ranted about this before. I own it, right? But now when you want me to subscribe to an account, I don't have any ownership anymore. Now, maybe I don't want to own Disney Plus shit anyway because it's trash.
Yeah.
Right? But the point is that it's not giving me an option at all.
In thinking about it, and the older I get, the less I think clearly.
So the older we get and the higher our blood pressure gets.
Blood pressure.
We're talking about
the blood pressure.
The blood pressure's bad, man.
Blood pressure.
Blood pressure. I reckon my blood pressure now be shit.
In thinking about this now, the CD may become more valuable because we all know that the LP is doing the resurgence and LPs sound great. They're warm and
they do.
Sitting down with your music nights and they're fantastic.
Yep.
And it was a very traditional way of listening to music. To me, thinking about it now, though, the CD may still hold some value. One, because it's a physical disc that has it. It's not lost into the interweb world.
It's durable.
Yep. But it is also arguably of better quality or one of the highest quality recorded points in time as a general comment that's accessible and cheap and still valuable. So to me, that may be there still may be some value in the CD, even though we know that it's sales are down and so forth, and they're sitting. And you go to a CD sale, and most CDs are not even worth $1 or $2 for these days.
That's true to an extent, but I think this is going back a long time ago, but when we had Nuke and Neil here, shout out to him, and he's a muso. I was asking him whether or not the issue with CDs always was that because they're digital and they're recorded on digital formats and then like analog tape and then converted to digital, the recording studio can do whatever they want with that recording. They can make the bass slower, they can do more bits and pieces and funny things, and so it's not really the original intent of the artist. Whereas with LPs, because they were analog tape and they didn't transfer to those to digital, they had to keep that original sound that the recording artist actually pumped out in the first place, right? So it's more true to the original artist's intent. The only problem with LPs, as you know, is they're not durable and they add in a lot of extra noise.
They add a lot of extra noise.
But so do CDs too. CDs on a good system, you can hear a lot of hiss, right? Because if they've been recorded on digital tape and then, on analog tape and then converted to digital, right, then that introduces a lot of hiss, a lot of noise. But then, as I said, the recording studio does all this weird shit with it. Like they make the bass levels a lot lower than they really should be. They make the highs too high. It's not what you're hearing at the artists, when they were playing the instruments and playing the music. So I think LPs are the true winner of sound. They just don't have the durability.
Yeah, that's
and they have all that other noise with it too. But that noise kind of has some charm to it. I like that charm. I like that noise and that pop and crackle when you put the needle down on the vinyl record. There's something cool about that.
I'm not saying there'll be a CD revival in the sense of people will be sitting around having CD.
No, I don't think there will be a revival
like that. But if you're looking for a really obscure album that is taken away from, say, an iTunes and so forth, and then if you need to transfer that music into your listening device of choice, the CD or original CD still may be that opportunity to get the only way to get that.
I think you're right. I think an accessibility, yes, I agree with you. I think that will be the best way to get the music. It might not be the best listening experience.
No.
Right.
No.
But I do so now I know what you're saying now. Yeah. Listening experience, LP will win. Yes. If you can forgive it for all of its sins in terms of like the scratches and the durability issues and the dust and all that stuff. CDs are way more accessible. Yeah, you're right. And probably more affordable too.
It's probably a bit more of a topic for Jason relaxation because I think he has had or purchased a few of those really high-end Sony products. You know those MP3. Hasn't he got?
I'll tell you what, with him, I'll never forget. It was early 2000s.
I'm talking about the Walkman.
He's got a FLAC.
Yeah,
a FLAC player. Yeah, he has. I've listened to it and it's amazing. It really is because that's the best of both worlds. It's digital, so it's convenient. It's lossless, so it's got no degradation of the actual, file transference.
Yeah. But they're expensive.
And they're not really. I'd have to talk to him more about it, but in terms of putting music on it, it's not as easy. You can buy the music as original FLAC like files, but you don't see them very often. Right.
So to me, where else are you going to get? I'm sort of defending the CD, I think, a bit here today.
I'm
unintentionally. Where else are you going to get a simple, almost pre-ready to go digital sound or music track ready to go on to some personal machine player?
I don't think you can, other than a CD. I think CDs are still viable. They're just not popular now.
No, I know.
Right?
I mean, obviously.
I mean, look, kids are buying cassette tapes. They're awful. Right? Cassettes are awful in every way, shape, and form. They're not durable. They sound like shit, right? But you and I have been discussing this for years, right? But kids find them charming because, you see actual physical movement with the spindles and things are happening and it's mechanical and all that shit, right? And LPs are like that too, right? There's charm about, there's a needle, it's mechanical, it's moving. You can see the thing spin on the turntable. And CDs, unfortunately, you don't see anything. Yeah. You stick them in the disc drive or the CD player in the caddy, and it goes into the caddy, into the machine, and that's it.
That's it.
But they're way more affordable than anything. Would you have ever believed CDs would be cheaper than LPs? They are.
Yeah.
They are now. Like, if you go buy an LP now, they're about 40-something bucks minimum. A CD's like, I don't know, 19 now.
Some LPs still hold quite a bit of value as well. A Herbie Hancock LP I saw just over the holidays at a antique secondhand store was $100. And the reason for that is it was a Japanese-only produced LP that, according to audiophiles, the way this was recorded is very pure and raw, and not only is it rare for being that it was Japan only and only ever sold in Japan when it was originally released in the 70s, but also the fact now that's been boosted by the resurgence of LPs in itself. So you're right, and I suppose a CD is a bit like a quartz watch in a sense too. That as well, it's the same. I suppose it's just a clear digital type of a response, whereas an LP has a mechanical and analog type of history to it.
Yeah.
And that's the charm and the warmth of it in itself.
So, and also don't forget the artwork.
Oh, yeah.
Because like an LP, that sleeve is obviously the real estate of that sleeve is way bigger than a CD.
Mm.
And obviously with digital, you get no artwork at all, apart from what you see on the screen. So there's some charm in that. And I think some younger people are attracted to that too. They actually get to see artwork, a sleeve. You pull the record out. You got something you actually it's all tangible. You can, you got something that you can actually hold and, physically touch. Whereas digital, you got none of that.
I wonder how this decade's going to go with listening to music as well.
That's interesting.
I wonder how this is going to go because it's changed so much
I think digital's here to stay.
Yeah.
It's not going anywhere. I think you're going to get more and more choice. I think if I had to take a guess, there'll be more and more streaming services, and everything by the end of the decade will be streaming. Everything. I really feel that. I feel that 2029, effectively the end of the decade, you're going to have way more streaming services than we do today, right? So now you've got like streaming services like Netflix and your Disney Pluses and your YouTubes and all that kind of stuff. And music's, you got Spotify and your Amazon account and whatever else you've got. And Apple don't play in that. Oh, they've got Apple Music, haven't they? So they've got their streaming service. That's why they had to kill iTunes, really, I think, because they were making more money with that than they were with iTunes. Just physically selling a file was what they were doing, weren't they?
Yeah.
In iTunes, they were just selling a file against your account, whereas now a subscription service must generate more money for them. It'd have to, So everyone wants that. They want a subscription and they want, choice within that subscription, and you're off and running. And that's the same in gaming too, We don't have it here, but Sony's PlayStation Now is a streaming service for most of its games. Even though you can download up content on there, you can do that. But you watch how big that gets at the end of the decade. That'll be everything. I'm telling you now. I'd be amazed if you talk about games that you walk into a EB Games and you buy a game.
A physical game.
Yep. I'd be amazed by the end of the decade if we're doing that. I really, really would. I think at best you'll be downloading a digital game, and most people will start streaming shit. I put money on it, because most people will go, well, I can't be bothered going down the street, and then the younger folk will say, well, why would I buy that? Why would I pay $80 for a game, even if it's digital, when I can get all this choice in a subscription and I stream it? But I hate that idea, because you and I are the same age. We want to go down the street and buy something. No one wants to do that in the future. I'll put money on it. End of the decade. Well, that's assuming I'm still here. That's the big one, right? That'll be the first thing, right? But I would think it will all be digital. It'll all be streaming.
That's probably a good segue into today's topic.
Today's topic, 47 minutes in. Shocking. So unfit with this podcast. Like Pepe Le Pew chasing that cat, Le Puff, Le Pant, Le Puff.
Pepe Le Pew. On
today's topic, was it 80s movies?
I think we were going to talk about 80s sci-fi-ness, things we liked.
Yes.
Yeah, well, the kind of cool 80s movies we liked.
We certainly had none of these problems in the 80s.
No.
Fucking hell. Your biggest problem was beta or VHS.
Yes. Wasn't beta better than VHS? Have we talked about this? I can't remember.
I've talked about it. Beta was technically better than VHS, yes.
Was beta Sony?
Beta was Sony.
Beta was Sony.
Yeah, and they got beat out by Philips, who made VHS.
VHS.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and it was basically the movie studios.
See, VHS and video, that's never coming back, is it?
Oh, it's dead. I can't see. Well, again, people buy records because of the charm. I don't see any charm in a VHS, right? I don't. What's it got going for? Look, let's be real, okay? So I'll tell you something now. There might be collectors out there that would. I'll give you an example. One little example. Star Wars.
Yeah. I was about to mention that.
Okay, I had it, and I don't know where it is, but he released, I think it was the THX
That's the old
special edition VHS tapes. And these were the untampered tapes too, by the way, before he started tampering. Because remember in 95, he released was it 97? The 20th anniversary. He released the redone shit where Han Solo ducked, and when Greedo shot at him and all that bullshit.
Boba Fett's voice changed
and all that stuff.
Lots of little things were introduced.
We didn't like it. That was the beginning of the end. We won't go there, right? It just upset me. Blood pressure, man. Take a blood pressure reading in a minute. It won't be good. And so I had those videotapes. These were untampered, original tapes, just slightly tweaked with I think it was
THX
quality audio, which is crazy on a VHS tape because even though they did have hi-fi, the quality was pretty average for even VHS tape. So they would be something a collector would want. And they would then have a VHS player, I would think.
To play and watch it.
Yes, yeah. If they're willing to, sacrifice the durability of the thing. Because, again, a cassette tape, like an audio cassette tape, every time you play it, it degrades, right? Yeah. So I could see somebody doing that. I really could. Somebody might have, I'll tell you another example, people that have got anime tapes.
Yeah.
Right? So someone that's got like Akira or Ninja Scroll or some of these other anime movies, Robotech as a series, they may have them on VHS tape because they can't find them on DVD or Blu-ray.
Well, Robotech, I just basically watched the entire original Japanese version on YouTube.
Macross Saga. Did you really?
Yeah, it's all there. Someone's uploaded it, whether it's still there or not.
Yeah. Oh, no, there would be, yeah. People upload that all the time, yeah.
But then again, it's a bit like what we were talking about before. Once that's taken down from its digital platform, where do you access it?
This is what I mean. So someone might come along and copy strike that thing, right? Because, YouTube's got its weird policies and someone might come along and say, well, you need to take that down, right? So that content's gone, right? But see, going back to something like Robotech, a lot of that would be on VHS.
Yeah.
Because that was released in the 80s, mid-80s.
I don't think it was ever properly released here in Australia, so there might be some value in... I'm talking about the Macross Saga.
The Macross Saga, I think, is currently available, yeah, but not on VHS. It'd be on, like, DVD or Blu-ray. I've got Robotech 2 The Sentinels movie on VHS. Pedro and I found that in Hollywood. We went treasure hunting. We fucking shout out to him. We went all the way around the world and ended up in Disneyland, and we walked past a shop and there it was, like a VHS like collector's shop, anime shop, and we found Robotech 2 The Sentinels and we lost our shit. I've still got it somewhere. But that's the only example I would think of is somebody, rather it won't be a charm factor like audio stuff like LPs. It'd be, I can't get this movie anywhere else.
It's the only way I can watch it.
It's the only way I can watch it. Or maybe they've got some, I don't know, maybe somebody can copy DVDs. I don't know. I don't know how you can do it.
I get the Star Wars bit too because I'm one of them. I I like watching the original uncut, unedited original trilogy. There was the DVD, a couple of DVDs came out a few years ago now, probably about 10 years ago.
But I think they were the altered ones, weren't they?
There were, like as a B-side, the original Empire Strikes Back, or the original showing, it was just completely raw and not digitized in any way. But I think that was the last time you could get that on a sort of a disc type format.
Right. Because I had those VHSs. I actually got to hunt around for it. And I remember I had a sticker on there or a logo on those VHS tapes saying, for the last time ever on VHS. Because obviously there'd been multiple releases and variations of Star Wars released on this is the original trilogy, folks, too, by the way, on VHS. And I remember clearly it said for the last time on VHS. That was a big thing. I remember it being a big thing. And I've got them somewhere.
That's cool.
Oh, they're way cool. And they're almost to the point where you don't want to watch them unless you've got a good VHS tape player, which I do somewhere upstairs. I've still got a VHS player. That's how retro I am. I won't let it go. I should put it out there for the council pick up.
No, it will be there tomorrow.
It'll be there for no one will pick it up. Who wants a VHS recorder these days? Topic of the show. 54 minutes in. Oh, well, we can wrap this up in half an hour, and then we're done our day's work. Then we can go get some sushi or something. Well, I'm fucking done. Have a bit of a nap.
Just quickly, I did see over the holiday season the last of the Star Wars Disney things, and
can you? Okay, let's do it.
I'm glad it's over. It's done. We can all move on now.
Because you know what I want to do? I want to set up a podcast with you, the Drunken Monkey, and Sassy Sahuni.
Yeah.
Because you and Sassy Sahuni have the same opinion on it.
Yeah.
Whereas the Drunken Monkey enjoyed it. I spoke to him
it's
a day or so ago about it.
It's yeah, okay. No, we should do that because that'd be good. That probably
I
does
want to
need
set it up.
A whole proper topic on Star Wars and how it started, where it went, and please just stop it. It needs to stop.
Like these podcasts.
No.
Fuck, I'm done with this podcast.
It's day one in.
It's day one in.
Day one in.
I'm already indifferent. I'm already like, oh, do I have to?
All right, we'll save the Star Wars thing for another time.
Yeah, I want to save it because just briefly, you and Sassy Sahini have the same opinion. She actually told me to never watch it.
Don't watch it.
Never see it. Never see it. It just pretend it doesn't exist. And I said to her, well, what if I've got access to Disney Plus, right? Not that I've subscribed to it, but I've got access to it. Should I watch it? And she said, no, I wouldn't even bother then. That's what she told me. She said it's insulting.
I would agree. With that. Not to be a negative Nelly about these things. They are, at the end of the day, just movies, but I would 100% agree. Don't bother. Don't waste your time with it. It was.
I've seen the nerds come out. I've seen crazy videos like the 40 plot holes or loopholes in the movie that we can go over. And your mate, Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers, he was ripping at a new arsehole the other day. Like, it's just, I don't know. You know what I'm going to say? I told you so. I just knew that's what it was going to be. I just knew it. You didn't have to be a rocket scientist to see all the evidence pointing towards that, where they had so many reshoots towards the very last, like to the nth degree at the last minute, that there's a problem. There's got to be a problem with this thing. You know, you can't be confident with this movie if you're doing multiple retakes and reshoots for the final ending at 1 month before the premiere of this movie.
Yeah,
that's what was going on, right? And so I knew something wasn't going to be right. I smelled a rat straight away with this shit.
On reflection of the 3 Disney ones as well, what a shame and a wasted opportunity to progress a story forward.
Now remember, so do you remember when Disney first bought the rights to Star Wars? And I think they released The Force Awakens. And we went to that movie premiere and we sat down and we talked about it. We said it was okay. It wasn't bad. I'll stand by that. It's not a bad movie at all. It's just very safe. But I remember saying to you, I've got a really bad feeling we're not going to get and this is going to lead to our topics now. We're not going to get a classic. We're not going to get an Aliens. We're not going to get a Blade Runner. I know it's not apples with apples comparisons here, but what I'm saying is we're not going to get that sci-fi classic. Because Disney are not capable of it. It's not because they don't have the talent, right, or the resources or the money or anything like that, because they do. It's just that they created a blueprint which boxed themselves into a corner. They had said, for the next 6 years, folks, you're going to get a Star Wars movie, right? You're going to get the Skywalker saga every other year, and in between that, you're going to get a spin-off movie. Right? And everyone was like, yay, this is great, Star Wars coming out of our ass, right? But what happened was they boxed themselves into a corner because they didn't give themselves much time to fix up fuck-ups, right? There were so many reshoots and rewrites of, the Solo movie when that was first being produced that they ran out of, they wanted more time for that thing to fix it, but they didn't have it. So at the last minute, they got Ron Howard in to direct it and fix it, and he did the best he could with it. And okay, fine, it was just fine. I'm not going to shit on it. It was fine. And this is what I mean. All these movies are just fine, right? I'm just being kind. I haven't even seen the last one. And I stood by my word, folks. I didn't see it. I still haven't seen it. Well after the premiere. Fuck it. I'm not even going to buy. If it's on Disney Plus casually, all right, whatever. I might watch it. If it appears on Foxtel, I may watch it, but I'm not hungry for it anymore,
Disney did have creativity though. You could go back and say in the early 80s, I suppose, for some science fiction. I still think
leading into our topic.
I still
59 minutes in.
The original Tron?
Yep.
Classic.
Yeah. Jeff Bridges was great in that,
And entering a computer machine.
Yep. Yeah. Well, see, that was in the era of we didn't know what computers were, so everything's possible, Computers like Electric Dreams, computers can like talk to you and open your front door and all that shit and fall in love with you, and crazy ass stories were being written about computers. And so Tron was perfect, you know, because it was I think it came out in 82. And so it was kind of, as a kid, believable that Jeff Bridges would be in the CPU. Right? And there'd be a disc and you got to try and beat the ECM, which was like this CPU type thing. Yeah, bizarre shit. But Tron is a classic. And I think we're talking about, was it The Black Hole?
Yeah, so they had an attempt, again, off of Star Wars, the back of the original Star Wars, to venture into sci-fi, which cost them a bit of money. And also the intro may have been one of the first times computer graphics have been used to introduce the movie. I know that Last Starfighter, that was one of the first, I believe it was one of the first, you know, heavily computer-based movies. Graphic, what's the word? Graphic bloody...
Yes, what's the...
CGI.
CGI, yeah.
Was one of the Black Hole. I like the Black Hole. Do you remember it?
I do. I was going to watch it again before you came up here, but I didn't have time. But I do remember it had those two robots. Yeah. And I do remember the Black Hole. I remember being amazed by how this spaceship was right next to this black hole. And I do remember some of the characters, like there was that baddie.
If you watch it now, it has dated a bit.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a bit cheesy, and some of the dialogue's a bit, some of the active choice.
Was it a late 70s movie?
I think it was at 70, probably 79 or something like that.
Yeah.
But the red villain, Maximilian, as a child, I remember him with his spinning razor blades, and it's a bit of a plot spoiler, but he does do some damage to one of the main characters in there. Yeah. And then they eventually get sucked into the black hole and come out the other end, and it's a very trippy, weird ending at the same time. But that was a bit of an experimentation for Disney at that point in time. Yeah. Who supposedly turned down Star Wars originally, the original trilogy series that George Lucas was shopping around. Yeah. But, so I guess they have in the past, but now it just seems to be rehashing the same old sort of stuff over and over.
They've had just... I don't know. They just don't. I don't think I've ever been their target market. That's just my problem with them. You know, like even when they did release Tron and The Black Hole, they were, I think, good sci-fi movies. But then they would release a lot of family-friendly movies that I just never really cared about. That's just me. And then going through the 2000s where they had all of those, what are they, Hannah Montana and all that shit. What? I guess... As a fucking 25-year-old man, I'm not going to watch Hannah Montana. You know what I mean?
Do you think we're ever going to see anything that's topping the old, probably what you could argue are the big three or big four?
Which we want to talk about. 102 into it.
The original Terminator 1 and 2, the original Aliens, the original Predator.
Do you want?
I don't think we're ever going to see...
I'll answer it.
No.
Never. Because they were made in a different time, obviously in the 80s, right? And I'll tell you why. Very high level, because the audience was different. The audience's attention span was way better than it is today. Today's audience wants, explosions and special effects coming out of their ass, and they want superheroes, and they want this, and they want that. The 80s movies that we're talking about, Terminator... 1 and 2. So Terminator, the original, was in 84. T2 was 91. And if you want to talk about, what was the other movies? Blade Runner, 82. That came out, I think it was 82.
I really like Blade Runner.
But they're thinking people. You got to think about that. You know what I mean? Like, I know Terminator you don't. Because if you want to talk about Terminator Terminator you kind of do. Because there's a lot of lore with Terminator.
There's there's a lot of there's a bigger thing going on in Terminator, and the people who it's affecting are just going about their day-to-day lives. Like Linda Hamilton, she's worried about getting a date, and the housemate, they're just young women living in a house, in a unit. All the cops, they're just like, another murder that's going on, so forth like that. But the reality is, basically, there's an unstoppable juggernaut of an apocalypse coming in. Yep. I kind of like that watching it again and over all the years as well. Yeah, that underlying theme of something is something bigger is going on in these people's day-to-day lives.
Yep.
And then it's really up to Kyle Reese to sell that to Linda Hamilton and do his job and,
So you know what's great about that movie? That movie was created in a time, honestly, where there was no real political agenda. That's the other thing. I've said this before. They can't help themselves, these movies these days. The studios have to put in their own personal political agendas or opinions into their movies. They can't help themselves, right? Whereas back in the 80s, they didn't do that so much. And yet they had just as much equality, so to speak, than they do now, right? Because if you look at Terminator, Linda Hamilton starts Terminator 1 as being quite innocent. She's just a normal person. As you said, she's looking for a date. She's with a flatmate. You would never think of her as being this badass superhero that she ends up being, right? And then as the movie progresses, she gets more and more confident. She gets more and more as the hero herself.
Yeah, the get on your feet, soldier.
Get on your feet, soldier. Yeah, that's right. So Kyle Reese gets weaker and weaker as this movie goes on, and she gets stronger and stronger. They flip, right? So by the time Terminator 2 comes out, which is many, many years later, obviously in the real world because it's released in 91 from 84, Linda Hamilton's this badass superhero.
Yeah, she's not as strong as a Terminator. No, she's just as ready for the action up for it.
That's right.
As they are.
That's right. And so there's no that progression came naturally. It wasn't force fed down your throat. And that's the other thing too. Movies back then, you had to think a little bit, like Blade Runner. Blade Runner, you really have to think about that movie quite a bit, right? To get invested in the actual world and what's going on around you and what's happening. Whereas these days, they kind of ram it down your throat so you don't have to think so much.
I like how Blade Runner, even Harrison Ford and Ridley, they talk about how they have differing opinions on what Deckard is.
Yeah.
Ford thinks he played Deckard as a human, whereas the director thinks he was actually the replicant.
Yeah.
So that whole...
Well, I'll tell you something now. See, this is what I mean about that movie, right? Blade Runner. This is why you got to think about it. Because on the surface level, Deckard's just a Blade Runner. He's just getting skin jobs off the beaten track. So he's rounding up all these rogue replicants. But reality is that it's been insinuated for so many years that he himself is a replicant designed to get rid of other replicants. And there's one scene. Now, I'm pulling this out of my ass. There's one scene. Because in Blade Runner, they've got that machine and it looks at your eyes. The Voicom. And it looks at your eyes and sees the pupil being dilated as you're being asked questions like, you see a turtle flipped over on its shell, struggling in the blazing desert sun. What do you do? And then they'll make that answer and they'll say, oh, I just walk past and ignore it or something like this. I can't remember the exact line, but that kind of question. In that movie, you can clearly see that the pupils are dilated and purpley at certain points of the way the light reflects in the eye. Do you know what I'm talking about? And there's one shot in the movie later on where Deckard's chasing down Roy. And you can see the same purpley reflection in his eye at a certain scene. It's very subtle, but people have picked up on it. And it's been insinuated for many, many years that Deckard's a replicant. Right? But a very well-engineered one that can beat the what is it called? The
Voicom machine.
Yeah, Voicom.
So I'm of the opinion, and this is what I love about, this is why I really like Blade Runner.
Yep.
Because it raises questions and you build a universe and you go away and discuss and debate it. And I'm of the opinion that no, he's not a replicant. But
did you see? But see, this is what's so great about that movie. I could be completely wrong here, right? I know it could be, but I'm of the school that he is, because even the picture of his mother is phony. because his mother's, it's all black and white and it looks like it's set in the 1940s, whereas Blade Runner was originally supposedly 2019, right? So it's actually the past now because we're 2020 now.
That's right.
Right. But
well, it's 2029 when Arnie's sent back. It's 2029 when the Terminator sent back in Kyle Reese. So we've got the end of this decade.
End of this decade. Well, I'll tell you what, it could happen.
Out.
We'll get to Terminator in a bit more detail. But you know what I mean? So there's certain things about his wardrobe. There's a scene where he sits down near his wardrobe and there's all these old artifacts on his wardrobe, and one of the pictures on his mirror is supposedly of his mother. But then he can't really recall his mother.
No, that's right. And the movie doesn't really go into any of his history.
But see how it's a bit dodgy. So he himself is dodgy. That's why the theory of him being a replicant potentially holds water.
The only thing against that would be that, don't they admit even in Blade Runner that they haven't developed the lifespan, or is Rachel the one that will still die after the 4 years at that point?
Rachel will still die after 4 years.
So then Deckard's only been around for 3 years or 2 years.
That's right, but he hasn't got memory of that.
He hasn't got memory of that. But I suppose then it adds weight to that argument because they don't really go into his backstory. There's no.
That's right. That's right, and he
just dumps you into the film, and
that's
off it goes.
And I'm sure there's a line in the movie where he says he can't remember his mother, right? But there's a really
that could have just
very subtle scene.
He's hypertensive and he's not taking his medication.
He's hypertensive. His blood pressure is 140 over 110. He's in the shit. But the point is, there's a scene in that movie where just the light reflects off his eyes and he's got that same purpley eye as all the other replicants do.
It could be when he's in one of the flying cars. I think I
do you know what I'm talking about? There's a scene. It's very subtle. And that movie is a very it's quite a difficult movie in a lot of ways to like. But it's such a – I can't imagine, apart from film enthusiasts today, going to the movies to watch that movie. The modern audience wouldn't accept that movie, I don't think, because there's not enough action in it.
It's too slow.
It's too slow. Exactly. It's too slow, not enough action. You got to think, right? It doesn't make sense. It's not very clear. Some of the dialogue's mumbly, right? You know, and it's very dark. It's very depressing.
They say, though, at the time it was released, that suffered exactly from those problems because Harrison Ford had to go back and narrate what was going on because the test screening audience had no idea what the hell was going on when they were watching it first time. But probably after years and years and years and years of watching it, that's why you build your own opinion. And
it's a movie you got to watch more than once. You have to. I don't know how many times I've seen Blade Runner. It's one of my favorite sci-fi movies of all time. It truly is. But it just doesn't make things obvious, you know. Unfortunately, it looks a little dated now, only because even though they were very clever, some of the product placement in the background, like TDK and some of these Pan Am, they're all now since gone. So now, you know, the future has actually caught up with it, you know, whereas back in 82, they were relevant companies, and you can imagine the neon signs blasting you everywhere with product placement, whereas now we actually are now the future. We are living that era where it was set. Those companies cease to exist. So when you watch it, it's kind of a bit like, oh, well, yeah, it's kind of dated now. But it holds up beautifully in a lot of ways. And I just find it a bit tragic that somewhere, somehow, people were compelled to create a sequel in Blade Runner 2049. And the only thing, I don't want to harp on it because it's not an 80s movie. We want to talk about 80s movies more in a bit more detail. But with that movie, I just felt it was unnecessary. It just was unnecessary. It wasn't awful. But it just didn't, I don't know why it exists.
Whether people were calling for it, I always wanted to see something else from that universe from Blade Runner. But again, you're right. I think I agree. After watching it, it was just a bit meh.
It was like, it wasn't awful, you know, but it was like, why do you exist? You didn't actually, I don't think in any way, shape or form enhance the first movie. You didn't actually enhance it. I don't think. And I actually think it did Harrison Ford a bit of a disservice, if I'm honest. Like, and this is the problem with Terminator. Terminator 1 and 2 are classics, absolute classics, right? Fantastic, strong female character, great male characters, fantastic. And then you get to the modern Terminator. I haven't seen the latest one, but I know what happened in it. And why do you continue with it? If you're going to do damage to the first two movies and their legacy, why would you continue it? They've actually damaged that franchise from my understanding of the latest movie that's been released last year. But no need for it, And notice too, as you go further into the Terminator franchise, there's more explosions, less lore, less substance, more crash bang. You know what I mean? That's the problem. Because Terminator 2 is a classic, even though it's got a lot of action in it, it's still held true to the lore. And then I think Terminator 3, I didn't hate Terminator 3. That was the one with the female Terminator.
Yeah, again,
and
the
Claire
Terminators
Danes
start getting a bit too over the top with their technology and the T-1000 was pretty amazing. But
played beautifully by Robert Patrick, brother of Richard Patrick, lead singer from Filter.
T2, but it ended in T2, didn't it? Schwartz was put down into the lava pit. Yeah, and that was basically it.
I just watched Terminator 2 recently, like within the last week, and I'd forgotten how awesome Robert Patrick was as the T-1000 in that movie. Like for a character that is supposed to say very little and have no emotion, really, the amount of emotion he has is amazing. Towards the end of that movie, just before he gets incinerated in the lava pit or whatever, the smelting pot or whatever you call it, Linda Hamilton, Sarah Connor, she's pumping him full of
the
shotgun shells, and the T-1000's just got bubbles in his chest. And then Arnie comes behind him on the conveyor belt, and Arnie's been beaten up badly because he's an inferior T-800. He's last year's model. He's running out. When you buy a car in January,
run out model.
Arnie was the run out model. And he had like this rocket launcher thingy. I don't know what it was. And anyway, it split the T-1000 in half. But before that, as Linda Hamilton's pumping him full of shotgun shells, he does this. He wiggles his index finger at her like, no. Absolutely brilliant, right? And see, you don't have to say much to convey what's going on. You know what I mean? But Terminator's a classic, but I don't want to talk about Terminator, and I don't even think about Terminator beyond Terminator 2.
Arnie's excellent. I would go back to in Terminator, the first Terminator.
Oh,
I don't think he was supposed to be the Terminator. I think they were trying. He might have stumbled across it.
Wasn't it Dolph Lundgren? Wasn't he supposed to be Terminator? Or have I pulled that out of my ass?
Not sure, but Arnie,
probably have.
I think was going to be Kyle Reese, and then they saw him. Thought, nah, let's do him. Let's do him as the Terminator. He's excellent. Yeah. As that just machine crunching through. But then again, that's probably part of the problem with Terminator that had to continue on as the years go by. Yeah, we know that it's a living tissue over an endoskeleton and they do age, but that probably...
It doesn't make sense. That's what I mean. See...
The comical continuing of him having to be in it.
That's what I mean. But they couldn't help themselves with that franchise. They put more into it, and Arnie became more comedy relief as the Terminator as time went on. I think it was T3, I could be wrong, or Genesis, one of them.
T3 has that coffin scene and he gets programmed not to kill anyone.
That's right. And he puts on those sunglasses, but they're stars. And it just looks so stupid. You know what I mean? Like, the first one, there was none of that. He was a badass. Remember he got out of, I think it was Terminator 2? Or maybe it was 1. He gets out, because when you travel through time, you're naked, right? So Arnie with his big schlong, he's walking through the bar or something, and he takes some bikie jackets. Bikie
T2.
It's T2, isn't it? He takes a bikie jacket, and he puts the sunglasses on, and he looks like a badass. But then the subsequent Terminator movies, they made him a bit more comedy relief, and I couldn't deal with that. I just couldn't deal with it.
Started to get a little bit carry on.
It got a little bit carry on. I just carry on Terminator. Carry on Terminator.
You know, Bill Paxton too was one of the punks in the first.
Yes, he was. And there's a little thing about Bill Paxton. Yep. He's the only actor that's ever been in every
Alien, Predator,
yep,
and Terminator.
That's right.
So he was thrown against a wall in Terminator.
Yep.
He's Hudson in Alien.
That's right.
He was great.
Oh.
That's
rest in peace, Bill.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Bill Paxton. What an awesome actor. And he was great in. Let's get to it. What a classic franchise.
Just one little bit about Bill Paxton. He actually was a Suicidal Tendencies fan and knew Mike. So I linked back to music.
Yep.
I didn't know this too. When he passed away, Mike Muir from the legendary 80s metal. Well, they're still going, but thrash punk band.
Yep.
They worked together, Mike Muir and Bill Paxton. I think they were delivery boys, paper boys, or something like that.
Yeah.
So he was a Suicidal Tendencies fan. And then Predator. It was Predator 2 where he was killed by the over-the-top 80s action of Predator 2. But Alien, sorry.
Mate, there's something, I don't know if it was Bill Paxton. He was Texas-born, but I'm not sure if it was him or another actor. I might be getting this mixed up, but he was at the JFK shooting as a young boy.
Holy moly.
A young, like 2 years old or something like that, 2 or 3 years old. He was with his parents, and they were at the motorcade. And I'm sure it's Bill Paxton. That's his other link.
You're right.
Is that he was at the... So there's like a really wacky trivia thing that who was in Aliens, Predator, Terminator, and was part of the JFK... and witnessed the JFK shooting.
I've never heard the witness of JFK
shooting. Well, he apparently he was there with his parents.
Holy
as a very young boy, like a baby, basically.
You're right.
And he was... They took him to the motorcade at Dealey Plaza, and there's a picture of him. I'm sure it's Bill Paxton. That was his little weird link that he had as a useless bit of trivia. But Aliens, one of my favourite movies, honestly. I'm talking Alien and Aliens. And Aliens interesting because it's one of the great horror movies of the late 70s. It really is. I think it came out, 78 or 79 or 79. Ridley Scott directed. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And again, this is the difference between modern movies and movies of the bygone era. Because again, it's very slow. It's a very slow, methodical horror movie, really. The main protagonist is obviously Sigourney Weaver as Ripley, who, again, a bit like Sarah Connor in Terminator, she starts off as a bit of a... she's not your typical action hero. She's... what is she? She's a... Not a...
They're just freight.
Quarantine. She's a freight...
They're just freight people.
But what's her role on that mining vessel?
That's stretching my memory.
I know, it's stretching mine too, but she's either a quarantine specialist or she's a mineral specialist.
They're all non-military, aren't they?
She's not part of the military.
The whole crew is
exactly. She's just working on this mining vessel.
And it's a distress signal that sends them to
a planet.
Yep.
And they go to that planet, and there is basically they go down to the planet from memory. It's been a long time since I've seen it. And one of the crew members comes across the eggs and the space jockey.
The space jockey.
The space jockey, which would later be in Prometheus. And he, what do you call it? The sucker punctures his mask and ingests him with
It's John Hurt.
John Hurt. And ingests him with the egg or whatever it is, and then he recovers, and then the traumatic scene of the alien at the breakfast table. Look, I always think they have a breakfast because in the back of the scene you can see breakfast cereal. Do you remember?
I'm sure it's breakfast.
It's breakfast because they got like breakfast cereal on the bloody table.
I love how it was parodied in Spaceballs. As well. And they used John Hurt, and he says "not again" or something.
Yeah, that's right, not again. Spaceballs is great. But yeah, so then that scene is think of the era. That's unbelievable. That the alien comes out and runs across. It's a bit silly now. When you watch it now, it's a bit silly. That little alien pops out of the stomach and then runs across the table. Looks a bit silly.
Yeah, but like when you see photos and still shots of the alien actually coming out, it's pretty good what they were doing.
Oh yeah,
back then.
Back in the time, yeah.
Of all of these puppets, all they're restricted by what they can do. But yeah, I think it's pretty impressive.
It's impressive, but it is a horror movie. It's very slow and
then it just goes along and eventually wipes out the crew one by one.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's a little bit of I suppose there's a nod to Space Odyssey. I might have got that wrong, but their android goes a bit haywire.
Yep. What was the android? Because in Aliens it was Bishop, but in the Alien it's not Bishop. It's I can't remember his name.
Now, was he directed by the company to keep the xenomorph?
Yes, because if you remember, Ripley and the android have a big argument about the quarantine procedures. Because she wants to isolate him, and the android wants to study it, and so the android's directed by the company to let the alien out.
It's Ash.
Ash, yeah, I knew it wasn't Bishop. Ash, and Ash malfunctions.
Ian Holm, and he went on to do. We probably will run out of time. It's not really science fiction. The Lord of the Rings that needs a.
That's a topic in itself.
That trilogy.
Yeah, but yeah. So he malfunctions. Oh, that's scene where he gets the magazine and he rolls the magazine up and he starts putting the magazine that's been rolled up down Ripley's throat or mouth, so she chokes. Is horrific. You know. I think I watched that as a kid. Yeah. And I shouldn't have watched it because it's a little bit horrific. But that's a classic movie. And again, I don't know if that would work today because there's not a lot of action per se. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of special effects. It's all on the one set. There's only a handful of characters who basically get eliminated one by one.
There's no weapon.
There's no weapon.
Basically build a flamethrower or something.
Yeah, they built that because again, they're not
whatever they've got.
They're not military. They're scientists. You know. Oh, she's an engineer. Ripley's an engineer. Yeah. That's right. So that's a different premise too, in itself, because there's no gun ho. They mow this thing down. That would have saved them a lot of time. So they had to build that flamethrower and do all that sort of stuff. And then you've got Aliens.
Yeah. James Cameron.
In 86.
Did Aliens, eh?
Yeah. James Cameron did Aliens. And that's very different.
I think he got that because of the success of Terminator 2.
Terminator, yeah. Well, Aliens is very different from Alien. Because if Alien's a horror movie, Aliens is an action movie.
It's a war movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And Ripley, again, this is interesting, right? If you watch it closely, at the start of that movie, Ripley again has gone back to her previous character in terms of not wanting any conflict. She's not a soldier. She's working a loader.
She's got probably post-traumatic stress disorder.
And her blood pressure would be shit.
Her blood pressure's shit.
She's probably medicated for blood pressure for sure because she's got PSD. So she's not wanting conflict. So she's not your typical action hero, right? And then, of course, by the end of it, she's joined the military and... The
guy from Man About You.
That was Paul Reiser.
Yeah,
Paul Reiser. Mad About You.
Do-do-do-do-do.
And you know what? He plays the same fucking part. Because he's a little weasel in that. Well, Helen Hunt and Paul Reiser were in Mad About You, weren't? Because that was his wife.
That was it, yeah.
Right. But Paul Reiser is the same in Aliens as he is in Mad About You. He's like a little weasel type guy. Company man. We manufacture those, by the way, because he's spotting all the reactor core and all that sort of stuff, saying they manufacture it. And Ripley's not wanting any part of it. She looks like she's completely out of place in that planet and that situation. It's horrific. It's horrifying. And it starts off as a horror movie again, from like it does in Alien, and then it progresses to an action movie. When they come across not just one alien, but aliens.
Yeah.
And I remember when that
the premise, they discovered the colony.
Yep.
No, they leave the eggs around, and it actually, no, of course. Newt and her family were out there, and they stumbled across the beacon or something.
That's right.
The space jockey.
That's right.
Then that infected.
That's right.
The dad. He
That's
took
right.
it back.
That's right.
And all hell.
So everything would have been okay if they had never found that space jockey, which is where Ripley was originally, I think.
That's right. Yeah. That's the same.
So she gets wind of where they are, which is LVK42.
You're terraforming this.
She goes, "You're terraforming this," and they're like, "Yeah, it's what we call a shake and bake colony." I can't say that word. And so she's like, "Are you idiots? Why would you do that?" And they're like, "Well, there's nothing there." And she's like, "Bullshit. That's where my ship was."
Yeah, that's where we
harassed by a fucking alien. And so, she goes back to investigate because she's familiar with the planet.
No, they lose communication.
Yes, but she's familiar with the planet.
Yeah.
And so
she's the part of there as an envoy. Or
that's right. Because you remember, what's her name?
Vasquez.
That's right. Thank you for that. Vasquez goes, "Who's this?" And the other one says, "Well, she saw an exomorph." And then she says, "Well, I hope you take this seriously. I really do, because if one of those things just gets through, they took out my entire crew, all this shit. If Pedro was here, he'd be ripping me a new arsehole because he remembers it word for word. I'll tell you a story about that. We saw aliens randomly at my relative's house in Italy, and it was all dubbed in Italian.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
And Pedro translated it in English. Because he can remember every word, literally every word, right? Because he's seen that so many times. And I'll tell you now, I wish he was here because he lost a bet at school. Because remember they had the direct...
Mamma mia.
Yeah, you remember he had a director's cut?
Yeah.
Right? They had the director's cut. And the director's cut included the turrets, right?
That was awesome.
That was fucking awesome, right? And I remember at school... him and this other guy had a big argument about how many rounds were left when the aliens finally bugged out of there. Because remember, the aliens kept coming.
Yeah.
And there were four turrets or 2 turrets.
Oh, what a trivia question.
Yeah.
Is it 7? No.
No. Where's Pedro? It was 1.
1.
Yeah. Because the first one runs out of ammo and you hear the aliens going, right, like they're screaming and they're just getting butchered coming through the tunnels. And then the other one's basically going down and Hudson's going, "Come on, baby, come on." Right?
They're overheating. Again, an awesome part of that.
Yeah, the lighting. The lighting is amazing in that.
But you see the guns. That's all right. From memory, you see the guns just doing their thing and then the countdown.
Yep.
And you hear the screams of the aliens.
That's right, they're going.
The corridor,
Yep.
the thumping.
And they're banging against the...
actually have, probably due to limitations of... graphics and special effects.
There was no CGI. No.
So it's the thought of it.
Yeah, that's right. Because they didn't have the technology. They couldn't just randomly create 300 aliens running through the corridors and the facility. So they had to use their imagination, which made you use your imagination. Because remember, once they finally found out that the aliens were at the reactor core, they had to bolt and shut down the medical center. I think it was the medical center where they were staying. So they shut the doors down. They welded them. Vasquez was welding, right? Because that was the best bit. Because they'd always like, "Hurry up, Vasquez! I'm going as fast as I can. Do it now!" Like, and she's like bolting the door and all that shit. So once they settled it all down and they said they're going to set up camp at the medical center and wait for help, which would be, I think it was 2 months or some ridiculous amount of time. You could hear the banging of the aliens headbutting the door, trying to get through, because they knew that the humans were there in the medical center. And then they finally found a way. They went through the roof.
Yeah, they learned.
Yeah. They went through the roof. But those turrets were an addition. They weren't part of the original movie. Because, again, I think back then they wanted movies to be shorter.
Yeah. Oh, it ran quite long.
Yeah, it ran very long.
The scene where Newt goes out with the family and gets the dad gets impregnated, that was different.
Yeah, that wasn't included. But see, that added so much more to the movie because he actually went, okay, that's how this facility got infested by the aliens, because someone went out there and went and found that space jockey again where all the eggs are, where Ripley was many years before in the original ship that she was in, right? Whereas in the original release of the movie, they never showed that. And they show the facility in the extended cut. Yeah. They show all the people working there and how many people there were. So in the original release, they only told you that.
Yeah, that's right. There's a kid on a big wheel.
That's right. He was on a green machine. He was on
the goddamn colonists.
That's right. The goddamn colonists. That's right. A classic movie. Classic movie. But I love the lighting in that because the best bit is when they cut the power, and Hudson goes, "How can they cut the power, man? They're just animals, right?" And the light just goes red. So there's just a sea of red. You just see red in so many scenes in that movie. Because there's no real lighting.
He was excellent in that.
He was brilliant. Absolutely. Game over, man. Game over. Because he panics. But then he overcomes his panic and he becomes a hero at the end. Remember when the alien grabs him?
Yeah.
And he starts shooting at everything.
He gets taken down inside.
Exactly right.
And Michael, and I can't pronounce his name properly, Michael Biehn, who played Kyle Reese. He was excellent.
Michael Biehn.
Yeah,
it's Michael Biehn. Yes,
he was excellent in that too.
Yes, well, he was huge in the 80s. That guy, because like we said, he was Kyle Reese in Terminator. He was in Aliens. He was in a lot of 80s movies actually. If you look up
a lot
his
of
IMDb,
them pop up
IMDb.
the same, like in that era.
Yeah.
So the Running Man, for example,
has 87. The Running Man came out.
One of the guys in the Running Man was in the original Alien.
Yes, he was. I only saw that last night. I was watching The Running Man, and I go, that guy was in the original Alien. And the Cookie Queen just looked at me like, what the fuck are you talking about?
The female lead was in Predator 2. She was one of the reporters or whatever it was in Predator 2.
Yep.
So they're all sort of shopping and switching around all the classics.
Well, I think in those days, if a director worked with you quite frequently, they would pick those same actors. If it was the same director.
It's probably all the same crew or team.
I'd say so, yeah. Well. I'd say so, yeah.
I saw, I don't think you could make it, but we saw Aliens again on the big screen because...
At the Orpheum?
The Orpheum.
Where you get the best choc tops.
It's not associated with that place in any way, but God bless them for showing reruns. It's fantastic how you can go and see the old vintage stuff again. Aliens holds up well on review. There are some bits that look really dated, but one thing, in my opinion, that looks excellent, even to this day on the big screen and has aged pretty well, is Predator.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I think that is one of the top science fiction-y action movies as well, partly because of Schwarzenegger, partly because of all the egos that are in it, partly because it is quite simplistic.
Yep.
And it's not super relying on CGI.
Yep. Well, he was a man in a suit.
He was a man in a suit.
Yeah, that's all he was.
It took a long time before the Predator comes into it as well. It's sort of two stories in one. You got the action team coming in and doing their little bit.
Well, they were doing a drug bust, weren't they? Weren't they doing something with the cartel?
The CIA and American, there's some kidnaps and so forth. A chopper went down and
the chopper.
They had to go and get in there and then... and then the team was brought in because Carl Weathers' character... Dylan.
Get the puny pushing benches.
Had to, and then he was sort of, basically go in and get that. That Predator, the first Predator, still looks great.
Yeah,
to this day,
it does.
In my opinion.
It does. And it's there's a lot of tension there. That music, you want to talk about soundtracks, I know it's simplistic, but the music of Predator with the haunting little drum, like, when they're in the jungle, and you can see the Predator and it goes...
Yeah, I'd go so far as the Running Man soundtrack. Yep. It's the same basic theme throughout that whole bit, but that, of course, it's all synth and 80s and so forth. That's great. Terminator.
Yep.
Very simple to it. Aliens. Actually, the Alien soundtrack, the second one... Oh, yeah. It's that, again, very sort of simple ding, 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 like science fiction-y thing through it. So, obviously, they're important and create and add atmosphere to it. But Predator 2, after Predator, probably, again, that went a bit silly.
I didn't like Predator 2. I didn't like Predator in LA. I'm sorry. I like Danny Glover.
He was great in that. It tried to expand the universe a bit, and there was that real little snippet of at the very, very end when the ship has crashed and Danny Glover walks into it, and they don't kill him because he takes out one of his own, I suppose. But you do see the Predator skull in there. I remember as a kid thinking, oh my God, this is opening a massive universe.
Yes.
Predators versus aliens, and I don't know. That turned out to be a big fizzer.
The whole aliens versus Predator thing on paper made sense.
Worked really well in comic books.
Yeah, it made sense, but as a movie, it just didn't. It didn't fly.
They just weren't there.
No, it was awful. It was abhorrent. What do you reckon the blood pressure is for the alien?
Well, they've got acid.
It's acid and blood. So imagine putting a blood pressure machine on.
Well, you can take their blood pressure, but you'd have trouble with conventional needles.
Oh yeah, because it'd just melt the needle.
Just melt the needle.
Is
Arnie the king of the old school science fiction?
I think so. Well, for the 80s, yeah, I think so, because as action hero, as movie hero things, there's Terminator,
Predator, the original Total Recall. I think that's excellent.
Oh yeah, Total Recall is a fucking classic, man.
Has dated pretty.
It has
from a.
You know who I like in that though? He was a great bad guy in the 80s, Michael Ironside.
Ah, yeah.
He was great because he was in Highlander as well. Highlander, The Quickening.
Top Gun.
Which was shit, but he was great in that because he jumped on a train and he punched some train window to the conductor. And he goes, I've always wanted to drive a train. Hi. He just had cheesy one-liners. Michael Ironside. He was
stereotype, but yeah, he's a great
always a baddie
antagonist.
Yep.
He was excellent in that.
Yep. Always a baddie. Yeah, Arnie's got to go down as one of the cult movie actors of the 80s. He just has to be. And there's always, he doesn't have much variation. He's always the same. He's always got like a cigar if he's playing a modern role. But you've forgotten about Conan. Because Conan, I think, is where he started, I think. And he has like maybe 4 words to say in the whole movie. But he was perfect for that.
Did they dub his voice in an early one as well? There's something about not understanding the Austrian accent. I think they might have
I don't know enough about him just to say confidently.
That's a movie I've not seen in a long time.
Conan?
So, yeah, Conan.
Yeah.
Conan.
Conan O'Brien.
Not Conan O'Brien. Conan the...
Well, James Earl Jones.
Yeah.
He's in there. He plays a great role. He's the baddie. He's the leader of a religious cult. But yeah, again, Arnie was perfect for those roles. He's just perfect. Was he acting? I don't know. Probably not. But
I don't think they would have worked if he wasn't in those roles.
No,
of those movies it was in.
No, he was perfect for those roles. Like Tom Cruise couldn't do that, and he's regarded as a great actor.
He's got a really good. I think he's
great in Mission Impossible for action type movies, but he's not the same presence as Arnie.
A good sci-fi movie of his is that Live, Die, Repeat.
Oh, that's Edge of Tomorrow. Yes, that's a classic.
I really like
that. That's a classic. Emily Blunt is in that. That's where he relives the same day. It's like a bit like, what's that movie?
Groundhog
Day. With Bill Murray, another classic 80s actor.
They're redoing Ghostbusters.
I know. I don't know why. Just don't.
Is that going to be I don't know why they need to do it? Or is this going to be...
I want to know who's asking for it. Well, I know people wanted... people wanted Ghostbusters 3 back in the day. I know people did. But now I'm wondering, it's been so long since Ghostbusters 2... which was in 1989. Ghostbusters was in 1984. Why would you want Ghostbusters now? You had Ghostbusters 2016, the all-female cast. I don't know why you want this.
Completely choose that out.
Yeah.
And just moves on to a... It's the same universe as the 80s one, this next one.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too. Yeah. But that worries me. Well, they've tried to convince... Dan Aykroyd's been quoted as trying to convince Bill Murray to come back.
But it's all finished, isn't it? Filming.
Yeah, but this is before it was being shot. But Bill, I don't know if Bill Murray was keen originally. But I don't know. And you don't have what was his name? Because he passed away.
Oh, the tall
Spengler
or something.
Spengler.
Like
what was his name? Ivan Reitman.
Oh no, he's the director.
What's his name?
That's doing it.
What's his name? He passed away. Spengler. He died, man.
Oh no, that's not good.
No, it's not.
Not the start to the year.
It's horrible.
But no, you're right. I agree. Did anyone ask for this? I don't know. We'll wait and see.
No.
It's not. I don't know. It's not looking too good for this year though, from a science fiction point of view. I'm a little bit excited about Dune.
Oh, okay. You were talking to me about this. Let's finish up with Dune.
A little bit excited about it. Although,
have you seen the 1984 movie Dune with Sting? Sting was in that.
Yes,
you have. Okay.
Yes. That's a tricky movie to watch, but at the same time, there's some really cool visual bits to it and some really wacky out there things.
Well, you know what the problem with that is that they tried to cram. I was telling you, they tried to cram multiple books into one movie, and it's hard to do because Dune as a series of books is very complicated in itself. It's very political, and I don't know how you can translate that into like a 2-hour movie, action movie, which is what they tried to do. And it just looked weird and was weird. But I understood it and I liked it, to be honest.
I think they're setting up this Dune to be almost like a trilogy bit as well. I believe that.
I think they have to.
They're going to. And some of the actors involved are quite, they're quite well known and distinguished and so forth. So I guess with the technology and so forth, I love the concept of the worms.
The spice,
the spice,
the Fremen. The Fremen. They. I always thought the Fremen were like crack addicts because they'd go and get the spice. They'd harvest the spice, and they had the blue eyes, the crazy blue eyes.
Because it's having the spice makes you that, but it gives you also.
That's right. And Paul Atreides got onto the spice as well, and his eyes changed.
So basically, crack addicts.
He's crack addicts. That's what I always thought the Fremen were. I read the book. I've read a few of the books, not all of them. And I saw the movie back in 1984, and it was weird and crazy, but I think it relied on you having read the books. That's my understanding. That's the problem with that movie. And that's a movie that I don't think you could plonk in the modern day and expect people to like it. I don't think people would like that at all. I really don't.
We'll wait and see.
And I'm a bit concerned about it if they're going to release a new Dune.
Yeah. I don't think it's coming out in June. I think it's coming out.
Wouldn't it be cool if it came out the 1st of June? June. I'll tell you something now, Fantastic Phil. We haven't had an ad yet, but this is going to roll now. If you want to check out Dune in June, why not go to the Orpheum? That's right. The Orpheum is Sydney's oldest theatre. That's right, isn't it?
No. I've got no idea what that was.
But it's pretty old. But you know what it's got? The best choc tops in Sydney. That's right. The chocolate goes all the way to the base of the ice cream cone. Not like these days. That's the other thing. In the 80s, the choc tops went all the way to the bottom. The ice cream did. Now, it's like one Mr. Whippy layer. Shit. And we don't like it. We're not going to have it anymore. So in 2020, if you want an 80s choc top, they're probably from the 80s.
No, they're quite fresh.
They're quite fresh. From 2019, they're run-out models. They're run-out choc tops. Get your choc top now. The Orpheum in Sydney. Check it out. Watch Dune in June. Now hold this button down. But it won't stop. There it goes. Don't need Jason relaxation.
Last movies I saw at the Orpheum were two good movies. The Ford versus Ferrari. Which is excellent. But that's that type of topic or that sort of vintage motorsport maybe for another time.
Yep.
But 1917 as well. I saw that yesterday, which was that Sam Mendes, who was a Bond film director. That was pretty good too, man. So keep an eye out for that. Although one thing, and it's going on a bit of a negative Nelly, is that even in this age of wokeness, there was criticism. This is why I don't like reading reviews anymore.
No.
Just go and see the movie now.
Yep.
Go and see it and make your own opinion up on it.
I agree.
One of the criticisms about this 1917 was, look, it's trying not to plot spoil, but it's basically in the action, two guys in World War One, and they've got a task to do. But some of the criticisms in the media about it were like, all right, it was a great movie and so forth from this point of view, but there's not enough topic about nationalism, which was going on at that point.
Oh, see, this is what I'm saying. Like,
and Ford versus Ferrari, again, it's a story. Okay, there are some movie exceptions and movie licenses to fit in, miss a whole year and so forth like that. But, and Ken Miles, the way he might have been treated by Ford probably wasn't exactly to what it was, although in the Le Mans race, he was told to pull back and so they can all cross at the same time. But at the same time, again, they were talking about, it's not political size enough, or it's too political size this way, and there's not enough this and not enough that in it.
But see, you can't. This is the problem. God. This is the problem. You can't make everybody happy.
Can't make anything
you
happy.
Can't. No, you just can't, right? And as soon as you try to pander to the masses, somebody is going to get, oh, well, you didn't include me. So I say, go fuck all of yous, right? Harden up, you fucking crybaby smashed avocado little pricks. Fucking didn't get my way. Well, you know what? In 1980, when people called me a wog because I had salami and cheese fucking sandwiches and no one came to my age, you're going to all go get fucked. You're just catering to the bullshit. Oh, crybaby. You can't please everybody, Fantastic Phil. You just can't. You just can't. Like, you could make a movie and have the who's who and cater to everybody, but someone's going to say, oh, well, actually, I felt a bit left out. You might have had this person in that minority group on the screen, but they were only there for 20 minutes, but this person was there for an hour and a half. That's that type of shit. So what I say is you don't know what you fucking want. That's your problem. You don't know what you want, and you want your cake and eat it too. And that's the problem with modern-day movies to finish up, I think. They want to cater to everybody, but in the process, they forget the content. Yeah. They forget the quality and the quantity of the content.
And when a story in a film is being told,
yep,
if even for its right or wrong reasons, whatever like that, but the criticisms about that or it's missing things out,
but that's just they'll poke holes as well. See, this is what I reckon happens now in a boardroom. They say, we want to create this movie. It's going to cost, I don't know, X number of millions of dollars. And then they say, cool, greenlight it. Then the writers come in and go, okay, all right, we have to cater to the masses. Who have we got in? Have we got that person? Oh, great, tick. Have we got that person? Tick. Have we got that person? Tick. Oh, we got that person? Tick. Oh, great, tick. Well, you know who never gets included? Me, that fat fucking wog with no hair. No one gives a shit about me. And you hear me fucking crying. You don't. Right? And then the reviewers come in because they're fucking smashed avocado pricks too. You know what they say? Oh, well, I'm glad that there was some more diversity this time. However, I didn't see fucking Where's Wally. Where's Wally wasn't included in the crowd. Therefore, I feel that this movie is not acceptable. Wham! That's the problem. And I'll tell you something now, Phil, whether it's right or wrong, that wasn't such a big thing in the 80s. That really wasn't. I think they made movies with a vision. They had more vision. They had a clearer story, and they made the movies they wanted to make. Now I think they make movies with the shadow of agenda behind them. I really feel that's what the problem is. And sometimes it's not a problem at all. We don't notice it. We're happy to see that movie, and it's great, like that Tom Cruise movie. What is it? Edge of Tomorrow. That was fine.
I don't remember highlighting or seeing any agendas.
No. That's what I'm saying. Sometimes it's not a problem.
They may or may not have.
That's
been
right.
in there,
but sometimes it's not a problem,
you just
right?
Don't notice it.
But you know what? If you want to pick holes in shit, you can. So there'd be somebody out there that'd be like, oh well, why is Tom Cruise there? He's the majority. He's a white man. Oh, and Emily Blunt, she's a white female. Oh, you can't win. And I've given up.
Just tell the story.
Just tell the fucking story. Have you said everything you wanted to say, Fantastic Phil?
Yes, for today. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
It would be good to come back in and discuss Star Wars.
So you're keen on that?
Yeah,
at a later date. So you're keen,
Drunken and
Sassy.
Yeah.
So if I get those two together with you, you'd be in on that. All right, done.
Yes,
It'll be called the Star Wars debate. And I'll sit back going, don't give a fuck. Shit. Take me back to the 80s. Take me back to the 80s. That's all I got to say. I'm not fussy. I'd just go back to 1985 with Marty McFly. I just hang out with him. And I'd say, don't go to the future. It's shit. And he'd go, why? What's wrong with the future? It's full of smashed avocado whinging people, right? And then you got to go shopping, right? You can do it online. That's great. But when you're forced to go to the crowd, they make you go through self-service and you got to buy a fucking plastic bag because the environment's shit, right? And people go, there's bushfires like it's never fucking happened before. Oh, it's climate change. I've done a lot of ranting today, fantastic. I've been bottling it up since 2019. Fantastic, Phil. Thanks for being in. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, mate.
Come again next time when we organise this little panel. Thank you for the 2 people that have been listening to this bullshit podcast. Thank you, Dad, for letting us use your garage. I'm sorry I read it about fucking movies from the 80s. I can't help it. As I just said, I hate the fucking modern world. Everything's a whinging, smashed avocado prick. They can't make movies without explosions and special effects and all sorts of bullshit. Back in the 80s, Sigourney Weaver didn't give a shit. She got a flamethrower and fucked up all sorts of aliens, and you didn't hear her complain. You didn't hear anyone complain. You didn't hear Michael Biehn complain when he got killed as Kyle Reese, when the Terminator got him. And next week, my little Terminators, we'll have some more retro and more bullshit. But until then, you can roll it, monkeys. Oh, it's the wrong button. That's the wrong button. I don't know what I'm doing.
It is a theory. It's a conspiracy theory.
Where's the outro? How do I do this again? Oh, that's right.